Hi everyone, and thanks for tuning in on skills management. Hope you will hear some beneficial insights about a topic where I say there absolutely is no one size fits all. Let's get started. My name is Mark, and for those who didn't meet me on last year's user conference, I'm heading Valkeen, which is a consulting firm based in Zurich, Switzerland. Here are my contact details in case you want to get in touch. Just briefly, Valkeen is a PPM consulting firm focusing on services regarding project portfolio management. We provide process change, tool consulting all around PPM, and of course around resource management. Throughout the last decade, we accompanied many customers in the EU with Tempus Resource implementations and proof of concepts and so on. Let's kick it off. I want to share something what I saw on my socials lately. The CFO asked the CEO, what happens if we invest in developing our people and then they leave us? The CEO replies, what happens if we don't and they stay? And there's so much truth behind how some C-levels might see employees, development schemes, and actively investing in skills development. Skills are measurable, easy to invest in, but that's just one side of the coin. And therefore, I think Richard Branson nailed it by adding, train people well enough so they can leave and treat them well enough so they don't want to. So finding meaning, motivation in your work is just the other side of the coin that should never be forgotten when speaking about resource management and skills. What is my plan for today's session? We will speak about current challenges. I will point towards potential benefits for stakeholder and stakeholder groups. I think that comes handy for those starting communications internally. Then we will talk about an approach or approaches to develop skill frameworks. And last but not least, I will show you how skills support you within Tempus Resource. Challenges and new realities. What challenges do we face right now when it comes to workforce management, skills management, and so on? First, COVID-19, transitioning on-premise workforce to remote. We are post-COVID-19, and we are in the middle of a shift from crisis response over to crisis recovery. But how to manage technology, Zoom meetings, people working remotely, nothing I want to talk about in more detail, but besides just mentioning remote work makes things much more complex. On the one hand, but on the other hand, with regards to skills, we will see that in a second, makes it much easier to access talent. Next, continuous change. So we are facing challenges to continuously reshaping the workforce to incorporate changes in business and skill needs. I was talking about that and business agility during the last year's conference in much more detail. So for those wanting to tune in, I think on ProSymmetry's website you will find the recordings. The bottom line here was there is no one transition from A to B and a transformation where we just have a real end point. Change isn't ending. Number of projects and changes is just continuously going further up. And we need to be agile in order to react to change as an entire organization, not just to project execution. And resource management clearly is one key, one enabler to do that. And we are facing new realities, so says Gardner in a very interesting article. They say talent is no longer geographically limited. So the competition for talent is changing radically. The options for acquiring low-cost talent are expanding, and it's easier to recruit diverse talent these days. Remote work increases flexibility, productivity, and reduces costs. Absolutely agree. Roles are now being broken down into skill clusters. This is based on a study that Gardner did. 40%, the outcome and the result was 40% of employees say they frequently complete tasks that are outside their real job descriptions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that roles are ill-designed to capture the skills requirements. Roles simply serve another purpose than finding the just perfect named resource matching for a specific job. The purpose for those, we will talk about that in more detail when we really do I will distinguish between roles and skills, so we will talk about that. But here, roles simply serve demand management, feasibility assessment. But I agree, in certain areas, it definitely makes sense to break down roles into skills to find the best match. Roles are now, and skill gaps can now be more easily filled through the gig economy and consultants. Well, how to approach? Gartner recommends in the same article, find a dynamic skills strategy or develop one, or at least move from a more static to a more agile planning approach. How to do that? By identifying and analyzing business conditions in and outside, identifying essential skills and skill gaps, identify and analyze the availability of skills, internal supply, external supply, by differentiating between roles and skills, of course. And what would we do with that in order to get more agile? Organizations must plan for multiple scenarios and on time horizons, just to address continuous change. In order to do that, we need to conduct scenario planning to address emerging risks. The outcome of that, with that, we can create a talent plan, dynamic skills strategy, and so on. But how is all that possible? It's only by being able to forecast resources with your planning. So accurate and flexible resource forecasting ensures your organization is equipped to quickly launch new business models, improve productivity, develop new products, shift operations, gain sustainable speed, and of course drive innovation. But everything is driven by your RCP, your resource capacity planning. Therefore, we have a picture of resource portfolio management, what I will share with you again. I was talking about that during one of my speeches on last year's user conference. RPM divided in 3 layers: strategic RPM, operational RPM, cultural RPM. First one serves workforce management. What skills do we need now and in future? So the concrete task here is developing a job repository, a dynamic skills strategy, and change underlying supply and demand models towards what if and scenario planning. The second one, the operational RPM, for me is really the backbone of the RPM. RCP and RMO concrete tasks, it's about assigning FTE or named resources to tasks. Cultural RPM, really important, is fully devoted to the human being within a resource. So this layer focuses on identity, motivation of people, the ambition of people, by driving purpose as well as an intrinsic motivator and all these things. The concrete task here, team rebalancing, sounding boards, offer personal development schemes and answer the why we are doing that. Skills really help with all these tasks I was just pointing out, because these tasks come all down to planning, stepping, assessing, developing, and retraining, recognizing, and yes, sometimes even letting people go. Skills, right. Okay, let's talk about some potential benefits for stakeholders. I think when you start communications, it really helps to address benefits with skills, because people get nervous when it comes to skills and performance measures and things like that. So for an individual base, it really serves towards an assessment of own skills and experience in order to identify future interests and career goals and aim for those. Working on specific tasks and projects that in the end really match your own skills and future skills you desire to learn, and reduce overutilization of resources and bottlenecks by simply knowing whom do we need in advance before a project kicks off. Specialist superiors such as team leads, RM, PPM, of course, everything what I pointed towards on the last slide, identify operational risks in teams and develop succession plans, measuring current opportunities and planning for future demand, create role profiles and job description according to skill and skill level descriptions to communicate with HR. And HR creates role profiles and job description based on consistent description of skills and the true demands, strategic workforce planning, designing and implementing career families, supporting the company's performance management systems, and personal development processes, optimize employee motivation by supporting career and professional development. Next slide. Sorry for all the text, but still, I think it will help. So for those wanting the slides, just reach out to me or Greg, and we will help you and send you the slides. C-level, strategic planning of opportunities, aligning a company's capabilities with the technology and business strategies we are planning. Plan and implement transformations, reorganizations, mergers and acquisitions. And for those having internal training divisions, recruiting, procurement divisions, skills have their lot. 1, 2, 3, 4 are for me the most important ones to focus on. But when it comes to developing a skills framework, you should understand that there are other stakeholders than just the RCP and RPM that would not only benefit, but actually maybe even already started using a skills framework without you. Just see that very often, and I will show you now why. We are now in the approaches how to develop a skills framework. The origin of a skills framework is either workforce management or resource portfolio management or project portfolio management. So still not the majority of companies really do resource and capacity planning, but some may already have skills framework and job profiles. Where do these come from? Usually from the left-hand side, from the HR division. And how do they do this job? They do it always with the same 3 steps. We have strategic workforce planning, workforce development, recruiting. And these approaches often start by an analysis of service portfolios and the skills required in order to deliver at this service level. These 2 components are then used to define profiles, roles. Some use even open source frameworks to do that, or set up and define new roles such as data engineers. And based on that, and on the desired service portfolio, we do then estimates of FTEs per year in order to serve this service portfolio. Then a company would try to assign their existing people and staff to those profiles and do a gap analysis and look for the delta in order to start hiring just based on skill shortages. The problem I see here is that many companies are doing all of that based on estimates of service portfolio and job profiles that speak the language of LinkedIn, Stepstone, but without a real resource portfolio management or resource capacity planning. And only based on a fictional service portfolio, there is no real test bench or based on any forecasting and planning realities that are connected to that. And in return, those skill profiles are roles that rarely can be used for planning and forecasting in return. So why I don't want you to end up with 2 role concepts, 2 frameworks, simply put, if you approach this, I always recommend starting it with an integrated skills management approach. So it's no matter of translation issues anymore. So if you do not already have something like a workforce management driven skills framework and or your HR department is willing to find a common sense or a joint language, hey, go for an integrated approach. And I don't want you to end up, as I said, again, in 2 role concepts, 2 frameworks, no translator and no, or at least less benefit between the both sides. All right. Roles and generic resources. I think it's worth taking a couple of minutes to distinguish between roles and skills as well. You remember the Gartner study I was referring to in the beginning in the article where it says 40% of employees say they frequently complete tasks that are outside of their job descriptions. Therefore, you should break down roles into skills because maybe roles are ill-designed to capture the skills required for today's workflows. So what is the purpose of roles, first of all? It's demand management. And I'm taking a slide from a joint presentation I did on last year's user conference together with Elmar Lotz from Deloitte, where we developed a real good process that works, where we plan on generic resources on the first stage of planning, first granularity, and only those projects that are assessed on feasibility, scenario planning, simulations, only those projects we do plan in detail based on a person or named resource basis. So the simple reason is why we are doing it. The amount and volume of new initiatives and projects has been rising and growing all the time. So we cannot do every project anymore. And therefore we need to decide in an early stage what is feasible to not waste all the planning effort, because planning takes time, sometimes 6-7 months, to just plan a project accordingly, to then realize we're not able to start that project because we have a lack in capacities. So that's why roles are made for feasibility assessment before planning are named. And of course, skills will help us in order to replace the generic resources for named. The role concept, a slide I've been using for 10 years now, still the same, still applies. We have a primary role with one-to-one connection between a named resource and the value within that attribute value. And in order to plan on a generic level, it has to have a one-to-one connection between the named resource and a role. So you see the availability and capacity of the role by all named resources being associated to that role in order to do a feasibility assessment. When do secondary roles help us here? Precisely here, let's assume we do a plan on a new project idea or initiative, and we are short in testers on the primary role. Then we use the secondary role to ask the right question to the right person in charge, being of people or resources that have some people in their teams or in their departments being able to work as a tester, even though they have a primary role that is developer. So just finding solutions for conflicts and overutilization. And then we have skills as well, one-to-end connection to further describe and characterize roles to find the perfect match. A good example here is as well, you have different levels of granularity. This is why there is no real one-size-fits-all. One FTE developer in May is demanded on the one side, okay? So we find after, when we have to replace the demand planning for a named resource by maybe just simple attributes such as the programming language. Some other companies having so many developers, and it's really, really crucial to see in an early stage that we are short on developers Java, for instance. So they plan on a generic role that is definitely called developer Java. And therefore, we don't need this as a skill attribute anymore, but maybe other attributes would serve us best here. For instance, the platform these people work on, or maybe additional language, because the project is going to be kicked off at a specific location where this developer has to speak with project managers or the client in Chinese or whatever else it is. So what I really want to say here is you don't need a gigantic framework for your entire organization. Sometimes it's just one dimension, and maybe just a yes and no value for some attributes, such as maybe software, platform, language, just to find the right match amongst your developers, your testers, your project managers, and so on. Really straightforward, easy. One attribute, couple of values, and just yes and no. Some others say we need to add something like personal, interpersonal, skill and skill categories, or even a cluster of business skills such as project management, accounting, and we use ranges, advanced categories, not only just yes and no, to further distinguish between some people having even experience or are low, medium, high in a specific language they speak. So this is maybe the second way of working with skills, more sophisticated. And the top edge of the skills management is the skills management framework or competency framework. I don't advise companies using such a framework. Besides, it really serves, and they have the maturity of keeping this data up to date and really utilize such a framework. A competency here, I will explain how that works. A competency is the combined set of ability, desire, and knowledge in order to execute a particular function within your service portfolio. Okay? Whereas skills characterize the ability of the resource, and a subset of measurable and predefined abilities describe a competency, a company's capability to perform a specific task. This is where we talk about capabilities. And knowledge is simply just described by qualifications. But qualifications can come from teaching and experience at the same time. Some just use certificates. I read a book, yes. But some others really need the experience to be tracked as well. So a pure certification is just theory. Desire, really important. I will come to this just with another theory, really important, pays into knowledge and ability at the same time, regardless of the level of the skill and the knowledge. So a lack in desire leads to a decrease in the competency. And here again, the unmeasurable is the essence that will drive performance, productivity of the resource. Some things you clearly can measure, some others you simply don't. So again, this is a framework, highly sophisticated, not sure if it should be applied to any organization. But what is the unmeasurable? And what drives productivity and innovation? I really love, therefore, Ulrich's stages of employee connection. So we have competence multiplied by commitment, multiplied by connection. And skills only pay in the ability to do the work. But we still have the willingness to do the work, the desire, the connection, and finding meaning in doing the work in order to drive productivity and innovation. And again, the unmeasurable. And maybe you know the story about the guy that said, I'm helping get a man or put a man on the moon or to the moon. Donna used it in a slightly other context in one of her latest blog entries around the BAX model. And the story describes President JFK's first visit to the NASA headquarters. While there, he introduced himself to a man who was cleaning and mopping the floor and asked what he did at NASA. The cleaner replied very, very proudly, I'm helping put a man on the moon. So, quoting Donna here, purpose doesn't have to be genius all the time. It sometimes just needs to be something else or better than the stock price. So every job matters, every employee matters. And this is as well what you need to communicate. And this will drive productivity. So principles of developing a skills framework involve the people actively doing the job. These frameworks should not be developed by HR people solely. So to understand a role fully, you have to go to the core, to the source where the person actively doing their jobs, as well as getting a variety of other input factors. Communicate. People tend to get nervous, as I said previously, when it comes to skills management, because they always associate performance issues. Let them know why you are developing the framework. Use the benefits I was describing earlier, how it will be created, how it will be updated, and how it will be used. The more you communicate in advance, the easier your implementation will be, definitely. Use relevant skills. So again, focus on where you think skills will serve you best. So ensure that the competencies and skill you include apply to all roles covered in the framework, but only those roles you really need. If you include irrelevant skills, people will probably won't really adapt to it. So really important. Otherwise, it's just effort, administrative effort to keep the data up to date. 4 major steps for developing a skill approach. Let's not just talk about frameworks, but an approach and how to do that. Prepare and scope, gather information, build framework, and then implement. Prepare and scope, define the purpose and the users of the skill framework. These guys will use the skills. How do you plan to use the framework? Really important question. Who are the stakeholders who are using the skill framework? So maybe you should consider having something like a task force for skill framework, something like a skill framework team. Second, interview people on their jobs or their supervisors, maybe use questionnaires, or maybe even get inspired by something like a standardized framework like the Sphere framework for the IT. That is really advanced, but maybe you customize it and break it down to just a couple of categories. Then you build the framework. Design a first grouping, personal, interpersonal, business piles, 4 to 5 piles, create subgroup where necessary. So to further describe your piles, identify the names of the skills that you want to represent each subgroup. And last but not least, implement. Communicate why the framework was developed and how it's going to be used, how updated, link it to business objectives as much as possible, reward, coach, and train, and so on. For me, really important part here is my summary. Why? Because as I said in the beginning, there is no one size fits all, right? Should any organization invest in skills management? Not too sure. And this even doesn't depend on the size of a company. So some organizations with only 50, 60 people could have huge benefit from some skills or skill values and skill categories, because they have such a diverse or heterogeneous set of resources and skills within their company. And maybe some do have an enterprise resource manager, some others have a decentralized team manager or department head who's approving and assigning resources. Decentralized resource manager usually know everyone by person. If those guys do the job, maybe a skill isn't really needed. But then again, if you have a global corporation working along the globe, multiple locations, skills do serve cross-functional resource assignments as well as cross-locational resource assignments. So if you are short, you have a conflict, and even though you have maybe decentralized resource manager, a skills framework could help you just to ask the right person the right question at the right time, because you in Frankfurt, Germany, are short in Java developers, but there are some folks in China having Java developers just at their disposal and with free capacities. So you always have to find the way if a skills management framework would serve you. Do you have to derive and manage skills for all the resources of your shared resource pool? Absolutely not. It maybe sometimes only makes sense in specific divisions or departments. Does skill management make sense when done on a multidimensional or framework level only? Absolutely not, as I said. Sometimes maybe it's just one additional attribute that helps you to find the perfect match for a specific job. And what is always sometimes misleading, that people would think that they should develop or are developing a skills framework to implement a software that by an algorithm automatically just assigns the right resources matching the demand. This should never be your target or what you aim for by introducing skills. Skills help communication, help to ask the right question, help to find cross-functional teams, cross-locational teams, overutilization, get down with maybe unconscious outsourcing decisions that have been previously made just because you have been short in certain capacities. Should you replace roles for skills? Again, absolutely not. Roles serve a complete other purpose. Well, where do skills support us in Tempus? So this is something I want to show you within the application itself. Of course, we have a built-in matrix report where it helps us a lot. But other than that, where I see clients using skills the most is replacing resources as a project manager or an enterprise resource manager within a project. There is going to be a screen highly very valuable. For those maybe didn't see the screen so far, I will show you, because the same screen is going to be used for resource request approval processes in order to replace a named resource for a demand planning resource or generic resource. Second will be building a project team. Highly prioritized projects coming into the pipeline have to start just tomorrow. So this is the use case here. You don't want to go through an entire process. I pointed that on that during my speech together with Elmar Lotz and Deloitte. Fast tracks. Sometimes you just need the right people at starting tomorrow. Finding those people, this is where skills may definitely help you. Skills matrix analysis to find gaps in maybe and rebalance teams. Where are some skill shortages within your company? To develop development schemes, retrainings, and of course in the what if and scenario planning world, it will help us a lot. So I will quickly jump from one screen to the other. Go here, go there. Hold on a second. So you should see my screen now. Same slide I used previously, just having it here on my SharePoint, so I don't have to jump back and forth. While I'm logging in Tempus, again, what we start with is replacing resources. This is what we focus on in the first approach here. So I will replace resources as a project manager, and therefore use a specific screen. Of course. Hold on. I go into a project. For those who don't know Tempus Resource, but I will not explain too much of that. But let's assume we are project manager. This is the project management stepping screen, or the resource grid, we call it. We have resources assigned to this project. We see overutilized resource just by a heat map. We can add additional informations to a resource, such as the primary role, the secondary role, or the skills needed for specifically that task this resource is assigned to. In this case, 120 hours over allocated, just shown by the heat map. These skills were needed. In order to find a perfect replacement, I check that project out, go into resource replace mode, and what we will see here is on the top what the assignment is, 120 hours, and on the lower screen all the resources. And I will do something now in more detail to show you where we find a perfect combination in a working environment with working with skills and capacities at just the same time. Maybe I want to pre-filter all my resources towards analysts, overlay those with a heat map. In addition to that, maybe I'm using a secondary role as well. Let's assume it wouldn't be that green. So show me everyone who is an analyst in the secondary role or primary role, seeing lots of resources here. Furthermore, we can just use one attribute, what maybe is just one skilled attribute, where I have just a simple list of skills. In this case, we know we need someone with AI experience or skill or know-how. We would find then many people here. We can add now skill matrix values such as personal, interpersonal, certifications, language experience, because the project is in Germany. So show me and sort by everyone who is able to speak German. Maybe there are so many resources. I want to use the language in order to filter for only those being able to speak German, high, medium, and don't want to show me the ones with low. Furthermore, I can go around and say, okay, show me leadership experience or software and applications. Who is able to speak German, able to work with Tempus Resource, or is good in time management when it comes to a project. Anything you look for. Now, in this case, let's take Sarah Jones because she's available and has just the right skills we need. I reassign Sarah Jones instead of Bob Wilkins. I could have even used multiple resources in order to find a solution. Take away Bob Wilkinson and hit replace. Replace this resource, job done. Sarah Jones replaced by just the skills needed in that specific case. Going back, save and check in. Next screen, resource request, a resource manager. Let's assume I am a resource manager. I'm seeing a couple of resource requests in pending mode. One, acquisition target analysis, that's the project name, developer backend. Same screen opens again. So this is the demand on the demand planning resource, our primary role. And now I am an enterprise resource manager, having all the resources at my disposal here. I want to see all the developer backends, for instance, right? Right there. Show only available and overlay those with a heat map. Go for further informations because there are not too many options. Let's assume that. Again, maybe sometimes that would just help to have more possibilities with an OR connection. Or we now even may use assignment attributes that are optional fields just been used in a data entry mode by a project requester or a planner. He said it would be nice to have someone speaking German, client experience, and time management at the same time. So maybe I would just look for someone who is able, again, to speak German, at least in high or medium. Client experience. Let me show you client experience just directly in the skills matrix down here. Time management is leadership in our categories. Leadership, time management, sort by expert, proficient, basic, low. David Alexander is just the man doing the job. Taking David, taking the allocations, pulling it down like in a spreadsheet, deleting this one, apply changes, done. So replacing a named resource, a generic resource for a named resource, same screen. Setting up a new fast track high prior project. We need to find the right resources. We don't need any process. We don't have the time. It has to start latest on the 1st November, goes for 3 months. We can hit create without doing any like a project high prior already exists. Then we just call it high prior to one. Before we just plan a resource, we use a feature that is called the team builder. Again, same screen. We see every resource in the pool. We can use filters now, such as skills, roles, primary roles, secondary roles. First of all, maybe we need everyone who's a project manager. Maybe we need something like a skill attribute that is not even the skill matrix, way too complex sometimes. And maybe all what we need is someone who has PMI as a skill. Together with that, it would be really nice because we know this project is going to start and kick off in Germany, overlay a heat map who is able to speak German and is available at that time. Gerhard Vargas is just the man. I would do the same thing now with developers, with analysts, and use the skill matrix like the language to be displayed down here. Oh, sorry, the language, I already had that. Certifications, maybe applications and software experience. Always in a connection between capacities and the real skills these guys have. I would then use just by this adding these resources to a team, hit save, go back into the assignment mode and the grid mode and use those resources already in my team and just assign them with whatever, 8 hours everyone for 3 months. They should do anything else but that. So you can even have a new resource request trigger. Here, there we go. Build a project team, skills matrix analysis. Next topic. This is one real quick. A system report that gives me a map over the entire corporation for all the skills and skill values. For instance, just looking for language. How are the language gaps with Chinese, Spanish, German, English, programming, Python, JSON, certifications. We even have expiration dates of certifications very soon. Web services, or who is able to work in Tempus, should we maybe train or retrain? We can add filters or specific other attributes, such as, for instance, the primary role, to have an easy overview and sort just by the primary role, see all the analysts. Maybe we want to filter for a specific team to do a team rebalancing and just look at, hold on a second, just the Scrum team, and there we don't need every single category here. Maybe we just personal and interpersonal skills in order to rebalance a team or a team structure. Export that and derive your hiring, your recruiting plan from that. That is the skill matrix report. And last but not least, the what if analysis. That one is very fast. I don't go in the what does the what if world serve us all, but I just open a model real fast for those knowing Tempus. They know what I'm doing here, just refreshing. Gray projects, all the projects not been approved yet, only approved what is feasible, so they have to be assessed first. But that's nothing I want to talk about now. I want to use the resource replace as well. Here we see in the simulation world or real world live data that Henry, for instance, is fully overutilized in specific month. By utilization, I can check for what projects. Here a gold project called roadmap project. In order to find a replacement, I switch over to a resource map highlighted with a heat map, click on Henry, go into that project and go into the replacement mode. And Tempus already knows. I'm only showing Marc developer backends in their primary role, their availability, and blue highlighted the time frame of the initial assignment. I can now go, imagine it wouldn't be too green. I would go to the secondary role and search for all developer backends here. Maybe I even can use a combination of 2 or 3 people to be reassigning Henry Wald. Bottleneck management, what I really recommend here. Maybe sometimes you leave Henry there for maybe just a supervisor amount of an assignment of maybe 4 hours a week. But this is bottleneck management, and have someone else doing the work, but learn from Henry at the same time. Bottleneck management. Or you don't care about roles at all, and you just go for skills and look for specific skills. In this case, maybe .NET. You would see people outside your department, outside maybe your location, cross-functional, cross-locational resource utilization. Hit apply, say yes. In this case, only on one resource. And we found a solution to deal with the overutilization. Thank you so much for having me on the user conference speaking about skills management. Yeah, the only thing what I can say is I hand it back over to you guys, and have a nice rest of the day, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.